Hello, everyone. That fabulous group of music was a medley of two tunes, Return to Newcastle and Duke of Buckingham and Thornham Castle. The first tune and dance, Return to Newcastle, the composer Pat Speight. Second tune, Duke of Buckingham and Thornham Castle, the composer Jeff Mendham. The dance is Gentleman's Delight for that second tune. Both dances by Philippe Calens. The band is a joyful noise. The musicians are Daniel Beerbaum, Barbara Greenberg, and Kathy Talverty. Both are on the album Red Star Line, and we are posting where you can buy that album. Hi, I am Darlene Hamilton, and we are the Historical Tea and Dance Society. On our team, we have Lindsay Verbal assisting with the program, handling media and our attendee questions. And we have Adele Nichols monitoring Zoom for questions and posting tonight. Reed is fine, no worries, but we have Adele joining us tonight. And on Facebook, we have Larry Hansen posting and for questions. We invite you to post questions in the chat box on both platforms, on Zoom and Facebook. And I think you probably know where that is by now. And we probably won't get to them in this talk, but in the after talk. So stick around. At the end of this, we will be posting a link for the after talk, and we hope you all will join us. Thank you to Karen Axelrod and friends for the In the Moment concert every Tuesday live on Facebook. We love you all so much. So thank you for bringing that joy to us every week. I am going to go into a bio on our guest tonight. Barbara Greenberg has been playing violin and viola for country dance since 1980. She's a member of Hold the Mustard with Daniel Beerbaum, Paul Prespatino, and Kathy Talverty, and A Joyful Noise with Daniel Beerbaum and Kathy Talverty. A Joyful Noise and Hold the Mustard collaborated to create 2 CDs of music for Philippe Calens dances. Those albums, Red Star Line and Seasons of Invention. Barbara is also a member of Reunion with Daniel and Jonathan Jensen. Reunion collaborated with members of the band MGM for the CDs Old Friends and New Friends for Gary Ruthman dances. Later, Reunion recorded an album, Celebrations for Dances by Orly Krasner. Barbara is also a member of the trio A Band Named Bob with Bob Pasquarello and Bob Stein. And secretly, I'm hoping she'll tell us her Bob name in the after talk. They too have recorded an album suitably titled A Band Named Bob. Barbara has played for numerous dances and balls and has been on staff at many dance weeks and weekends and has toured the US, the UK, and Europe. When she's off the bandstand, Barbara teaches violin and viola through the Suzuki method. The Suzuki method. She created 2 Suzuki programs in central New Jersey, directing the first for 10 years and the second for 24 years. Please welcome back, because she was here last week, and we're so happy to have her on to do her 5 things, Barbara Greenberg. Thank you for joining us. We're so glad you're back.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. I so much appreciate it. Hi to you and Lindsay and the great team. Amazing, amazing team. Thank you so much. And great to see you all tonight. I'm really happy to be here and be able to spend some time with you tonight. Darlene, you want to put up that first thing?
Absolutely.
All right.
Thing number 1, all the world's a music balloon.
Some people might say, oh, the world's a stage, but for me, it's a music balloon and was since I grew up. This wonderful card came to me as a birthday card from my husband Daniel and my sister and Kathy Talverty and Bob Pasquarello, all the same year. So I had all these music balloons. But like a kid with a balloon full of fun, music was for me a source of joy and just discovery, play, but also a place of great comfort. And I realized early a place where to communicate with people. So growing up, I had an environment that really nurtured music and nurtured arts. We were escaped from the city people, leaving New York out into the New Jersey suburbs after the Second World War. And we did not have a subscription to the New York Philharmonic or something like that. But nonetheless, there was music in the house all the time. Record players playing, radios on constantly. We had our own record player, my sister and I, with little yellow records. I don't know if anyone else had something like that. And yeah, I see it from Darlene, yeah. And those were, fun songs and folk songs that we learned as children. The radios were on all over the house. Mom tells me when she put me down for a nap, I didn't sleep. I just went to whatever music was coming out of the radio. Mom grew up in a household that had music. Her father played the violin. My grandfather was part of Local 802 in New York, and he even played for Thomas Edison. Edison hired him to play across the country with a singer and an accompanist. They would play, and then the wonderful, not talking machine, singing machine would go on, and everyone go, woo. So I'm sorry I couldn't find that photo, but I have a photo of Grandpa in Kent, Ohio, in front of one of those machines, early record player. And Grandma sang some too. Mom played violin a little, but she played piano, as did my two aunts, her two sisters. My father, also growing up in the Bronx, like Mom, a few blocks away, had the jazz bug. And he would cut school as a teen and go down to the Paramount Theater in Manhattan and buy a ticket, watch the movie, but watch Benny Goodman come up on the hydraulic stage and play a set of jazz. And being a little guy, he would hide in the seats. Hopefully the hushers didn't see him, or they were very kind. And he would stay there for movie after movie and show after show. So the jazz bug really bit him. He would even go down to 52nd Street clubs. The managers would let him buy a Coke in the back and sit and listen to the jazz people play. And one other fun story just to share is in one of his bands, his friends, they were listening and auditioning a jazz saxophonist to join in with one of their little bands. And Dad said that he wasn't quite ready yet. But later on, he certainly was, because that was Stan Getz, the famous jazz saxophonist. But nonetheless, there was music in our house like crazy. Everything was on all the time. Dad would come home from working in New York, put on the record player, sit on the couch, and I would sit next to him. And Mom would make up imaginative play. So there was just stuff constantly. My sister and I would dance and play in the basement to the records. So this was just our lives. It was just part of the background and foreground of our lives. Mom took us out of school one day it was an early matinee, to see the movie of Pas de Deux that were performed by Margot Fontaine and Rudolf Nureyev. What other parent with non-dancing kids would take their kids out of school to see a movie of ballet dancers? There are probably 10 people in the auditorium, but my sister, my mom, and I were 3 of them. At school, we could start in 5th grade, and I did, even though I was just 9. Story is, I wanted to play the saxophone like my next-door neighbor, also named Barbara, who I looked up to, but somehow a violin wound up in my hands. So that's a good thing. I'm not complaining. I would play in my early books and realize, well, there's duets here. Well, if I played both parts, I can learn one. So I would play one and sing the other part. And my next door neighbor, Barbara's mother, says to me years and years later, I would hear you through the windows singing and playing with yourself as you played the duets. And there was one particular tune I'll mention later that was special, and I'll bring it up later. Around 11, we got a piano, and that to me was heaven, because the violin was great fun, already had a little orchestra at school, etc., but the piano was the fantasy world. You could play the chords, you could play the music. I would make up whole imaginative things. I taught myself for quite a long time, and then finally had lessons, which was great, but it was the fantasy instrument, could do anything with that, make up whole worlds of sound on a piano. I was aware of folk music from childhood because we would hear from WQXR in New York, late Sunday evening or early evening show called Woody's Children, hosted by Robert Sherman. And that had folk song and instrumental, but it wasn't something we glommed onto and listened to a lot. We were mostly listening to classical, nice pop, show tunes, and jazz off the radios and such. The one thing I did want to mention, I never went to a summer camp or anything like that, but the Bergen Youth Orchestra was where I cut my teeth on more major orchestral music. There were pre-college Juilliard kids in that orchestra, and I was sitting assistant concert mistress. I don't know how I got up to that chair, but there I was next to these people all in the first ring and around. But we played Tchaikovsky, we played Shostakovich Seventh Symphony, First Movement. I mean, it was astounding, the level, and it was really, really fun. It was delightful. The last semester of college, I took a class on American folklore. So I thought, let me get my feet wet here and my toes wet, and I researched about American fiddle music. Didn't get very far at that point, but that was the first step. And after my 2 years, after I graduated with a degree in music education, I took 2 years of training in the Suzuki style of teaching music, which I'll explain a little more later. What's called really talent education. Did that in New York. And then, and then came something that really changed my life. So we'll move on to number 2.
Thing number 2, the balloon expands.
So I thank Darlene for blowing up the balloon. So after college, I settled in Central West Jersey and found people to play with. Fiddle tunes, Southern, Irish seemed to be mostly the flavors we were doing. One of the people, Paul Beery, who later moved to Madison, Wisconsin, and started the band called The Last Gaspé, he said to me that he was going to sign up for a long Labor Day weekend camp. And it's lots of playing and fiddling and dancing. And maybe you should go. And I thought, well, I've never done anything like this. I mean, I don't play that great. I'm just getting into it with you guys for a few years. So I signed up, got on the waiting list, and the morning the camp started, I got a phone call from Lynn Hardy, who said, yes, there is a spot, someone canceled, come drive up to Ashokan. And this was, if I'm correct, the very first year Jay Unger ran it at the Ashokan campus. So this was 1980, Labor Day weekend. So I drove up and just had the best 4 days of my life. we danced, we played, we cajoled, we hung out in the kitchen doing kitchen duty, having the greatest time. It was classes in the day, music and dance classes, concerts and community dancing in the evening. And it was all Southern style, completely Southern. Greengrass cloggers were there. It was fabulous. Jay Unger, of course, and all the staff he gathered was fabulous high-level playing and teaching. It was just terrific. A few nights, I don't remember if it was every night, but a few nights for sure, after the program was officially over at 11, another band came to sit down and play, and no one had played the piano, but here was someone sitting down at the piano. This was Bob McQuillan and the band Applejack, and Michael McKiernan to call. And we lined up in lines facing lines. We had been doing circles and squares and, couple up 4, all that throughout this long weekend. And now I experienced contra dancing. At this weekend, there were 3 people attending. David Herndon and Gary Moore, fiddlers, who are from the Princeton area. And Louise Topp, who's now Louise McClure. She was my colleague in Suzuki teaching in the Princeton area. She had been after me all from 1979 into summer saying, you have to come over to Princeton. Because I didn't live in Princeton. I was west in another county. And she said, there's dancing and it's so much fun. And you can play. It's a band. You can just come and sit and play. I'm like, no, teaching's sacred. I can't give up a Thursday night. Well, after 4 or 5 days at Ashokan, forget it. I just thought, I'm never teaching on a Thursday night again. This is not sacred. We're done with Thursday nights of teaching. So let's go to number 3.
Okay. Thing number 3, a bouquet of balloons.
And thank you for Darlene's wonderful skills to now say, hey, look at all these things that are going on in my life in music. Lots of balloons in music. Thank you. That's great. So the first Thursday after Labor Day, I hightailed it down to the Princeton campus. I had never been on this campus because I lived, again, west of this area, and found some people who were walking along, and I could not believe it. They were also looking to find the dance on campus. It was just such serendipity. So I walked with, I remember one's name Robert. Oh, yes, the other was Andy. Yeah, Robert and Andy. And we found the dance in Wilcox Hall and had the most fun, as that T-shirt says, the most fun you can have without taking your clothes off. It was just the best time ever. And I realized that there's a pickup band. There was one discrete band had already formed, Tripping Upstairs was called, but just started to dance and play in the band. At this time in the 80s, for a number of years, the Princeton Country Dancers weekly dance had contras and English. And the callers were calling both styles. Steve Schnurr, Sue Dupre was learning to call. The dance was started by David Chandler. And I'm not sure if Beverly Francis, his wife, came down much at that time. But I know that David came at times. So it was just so much fun. And we were learning more styles of playing. There was New England style music, more Irish, some Scottish, definitely Southern, French Canadian, and this wide world of English was opening up. In November of 80, the main pianist for the pickup band, Eric Scott, and his wife Marge Scott, took me aside and said, we're thinking of forming a band. And you, with Eric and David Herndon, who I mentioned I met at Ashokan, and Paul Prestopino had come to play at that point. His daughter Perry had been dancing and said to Paul, yeah, I think you'd really like to do this. Paul had played banjo, mandolin, guitar for decades and decades and decades in the folk scene in New York, etc. And he came, and we all didn't realize the depth of his background, but realized, whoa, there's really somebody to reckon with here, a great musician. And so the 4 of us were a quartet, but not for long, because then we realized we'd love to have Daniel Beerbohm in. So we were a quintet at the beginning. 2 years? I think it was 2 years. And then David decided to go to theological school, and he became a Unitarian minister. So then we honed down to a quartet. And I realized that with David leaving, I kind of fell into a leadership role. I would watch the dancers to pace things and call the switches and such, but I began to realize, there's a lot to be kind of in the driver's seat here. And at that time, the Princeton rotation was kind of neat. It would be Mustard, Tripping Upstairs, pickup band, and a traveling band that might come through. And one of the bands that came through very, very early for us was the Foregone Conclusions, coming down from Massachusetts. I watched Cami Kaner call dancing and play his fiddle at the same time. I just thought, how does he do that? And so, Cami, you are my hero, because you kicked me into a whole new place of thinking about how many tracks you've got to have your brain going on when you're playing for dancing. So yes, you're watching the dancing, checking in with the caller, knowing when to call the switches, checking that everybody in the band's got a solo, etc. So I just realized this was a big job, but I was okay about taking it. We began to rehearse too, because I realized that when I danced, I really liked it if the music made sense to the dancing. If there was a balance, a strong point, or a smooth type dance, that the music enhanced that. So we would rehearse and make medleys that would help and make sense with that happening. And all these concepts flowed right into playing English too. Eric Scott was our original pianist, as I mentioned, and I'd love for you to hear some contra music with Eric playing the piano. besides being a research chemist, he was a very well-trained musician and a composer. So he wrote great bass lines. And he actually wrote them in his music, but then he would just use that as also something to jump off of. And so, first of all, here's the cover of the album that we made of contra dance music. This fabulous picture was not really black and white, it was really a bit of wonderful brown because it was drawn with a hawk quill and butternut ink that was made by Shauna Hansen, and she was Shauna Leader at first, and she had gone up to Maine to build a house, and she brought this down to us once when she was visiting her family in Princeton. We did not think we would use it for an album cover until 2 years later when the idea of recording came up. And yes, we made a record. We made vinyl. And then there's the back cover, which is kind of fun. We were nuts enough to ask callers that we had worked with, do you want to send us a signature? So I forget how many. I think there's maybe 40 something on there. And the picture of us is hard to see. We'll see one later. But Lindsay was going to close up on the top corner there. And you can see Fred Park, who's going to be your guest next week, Brad Foster, Fried Herman, John Crum. Connie Waring was a local Philly caller. Steve Hickman, Tony Parks. On the side, we've got the edges of Bob Dulcimer, Dan Pearl, and Tony Salatin. So it was just a hoot to do this, and we wanted to thank them because they had helped us get better as musicians playing for dancing. So from this 1987 album, we'll listen to a cut of Mason's Apron. You'll hear Paul on tenor banjo, Daniel on penny whistle, and listen to Eric's great bass lines and his powerful, powerful playing. Hope you liked it. I'd like to note that Paul Prestipino was working in studio in New York City. He was the head of the tech department, actually. And he was able to get us room time there. And a young engineer who, over the 25 years of making albums, he's worked with us on 4 of the 5 albums. And the other one was someone else who was an engineer that Paul worked with for decades at the Record Plant Studio in New York City. So we were so lucky to have these opportunities, to have such a great place to work. So another band that I played with at that time was a band named Bob. And we have a picture of the Bob. Sorry, it's a bit fuzzy. It was the best I could get off our CD. So Bob Pasquarello and me and Bob Stein on the accordion. And I met Bob Pasquarello really early, first or second year of playing. And I just said, oh, here's my musical brother. And when Bob arranged a small gig for him and me and accordionist Bob Stein, we realized, oh, I think we may have a band here and a band name. So now I had 2 musical brothers, and the years and tours with the Bobs were just years of laughter and great fun and great music making. We formed in 1984, played from Maine to Texas and even California, and we made this CD of contra tunes. So here's a cut from that album, the tune Waynesboro. Our wonderful engineer here is the super musician Bob Mills, lives up in Massachusetts now. We were recording now on 8-track tape, where the mustard one I wanted to note was on reel-to-reel with edits and splices with razor blades. So I now knew what that was like. So now we're up to 8-track tape. And we took advantage of the double tracking. So you'll hear Bob Pasquarello on both mandolin and piano. All the bands I've been in were challenging the accordion player, challenging Dan on clarinet, play Southern music on these instruments, and doing it really well. I want to note that on this album is Bob Pasquarello's waltz Midwinter Blossom. And it was from hearing this album and the waltz on it that Philippe Calens then paired Midwinter Blossom to his Dance in Early Frost. He had another tune to it, which he was not happy with, and he had not really presented it yet. And when he heard it, he asked Bob's permission, and that's how it got paired to it. So with Ben and Bob, it was 95% contras. So again, really cutting our English chops happened more with mustard. And so once a year, one of the places we would do this work on English and work for it was the New York dance group and the Westchester dance group would combine and do a wonderful weekend at Hudson Guild Farm in Northwest Jersey. And we'd have contra and English with an out-of-town contra caller, but the English callers were Christine Helwig and Fried Herman. And after working with Fried and getting to know her, she asked us to do a little project which was wonderful. And it's called It's Easy If You Know Where You're Going, which kind of sums up what she thinks about dancing and teaching it and how to dance. And so there was a cassette and a little booklet. They're out of print, but Lindsay will bring them up so you could see them. These are the dances on the cassette. And Fried played recorder, and Al also played some harmonica, which was great. And then there's the booklet. This was a beautiful thing done by the community, raising money to put this together. So it was really fun. It was just a delight to do with her. And we just, thanks, and we just so loved playing English country dance that we thought, let's make an album of our favorites. So we went back to Shauna and said, could you make a little adjustment, a very particular adjustment to that wonderful drawing you did for us years ago? So this is what she did. And this became the cover of the CD that we call our English country dance favorites. So I mentioned earlier that Eric Scott was a composer, and a number of his tunes, because he began to write dance tunes, couldn't help himself, were paired with dances. Fried Herman paired one, Christine Helwig, a Philadelphia dancer and I guess choreographer, didn't know she did much, Rita Gratzen paired two to the same waltz, and Scott Hicks paired two. And one of his is to Wooing Mari, a tune that he wrote. Oops, don't forget, Gary Rudeman did one also, sorry. And Scott's Wooing Mari is a real favorite. We know people really enjoy it. Eric wrote it for the wedding of two Philadelphia area dancers, Jan Alter and Anna Petrick. So we're going to play a wee bit of that for you. Listen for a nice little surprise after Eric finishes his solo. And the tune has some Scottish snaps in it, and Eric was born in Scotland, but in his solo he seemed to take them out. But go ahead, let's hear a little bit of Wooing Mari, and you'll see the sheet music. I hope you like that dance when you dance it. And I hope you heard Eric's quote of Christchurch bells. That's what he was quoting there. During the time we were working as Hold the Mustard, very early on, I realized that I wanted to sit differently than bands usually did. I think many of us have the idea the pianist is sitting this way, and then all the players are facing out to the dance this way. But I decided to sit side saddle to Eric, facing this way. That way I could see him eye to eye, and I was just closer to him physically, which I liked. I could see the rest of the band. I could see Paul and Daniel, and they needed room for all their instruments too. So we sat in a horseshoe. Gave me a great view of the caller. I could communicate very well with the caller across the stage, and I could see most of the dance floor very, very well. So I really liked that. And when we would finish a tune, especially the last waltz, Eric would watch me as we would play the last note, and he would watch me to release at the same time for a nice ending. And then he would smile. And over 10 and a half years, I got that smile in his sparkling eyes, and I would just never, ever forget that. I treasure it so. Eric passed away in 1991, after we completed recording the English Dance Favorites, really within a month. But back in 1985, he wrote a particularly beautiful piece of music. It was a waltz that we would play sometimes for a last waltz. I had been at his and Marge's house rehearsing for a duo gig, just he and I were doing. And I had my winter coat on, ready to leave. We were done. And Marge says, "Oh, play for Barbara that new waltz you wrote." Eric said, "Okay, sure." And he began to play this waltz. And I remember just getting absolutely lost in my imagination and emotions. And I'm walking around their coffee table in the living room, feeling like I'm walking along the banks of the Seine in Paris. And it's a beautiful hour where it's late blue twilight and lights are just starting to come on, yellow, gold. When it was over, I turned to him and just said that I was so moved by it and told him what the picture was that I had in my mind. He and Marge laughed and laughed. And he had thought of writing something somewhat like a French cafe waltz. And Marge had titled it The Glow of Paris, L'Odeur de Paris. I asked Kathy Talvity if she would be so kind to put down a track of that for our presentation today. And she did that with a second round so I could play along. So I would so love for you to hear Eric's beautiful waltz, L'Odeur de Paris. As I mentioned, Eric passed away in 1991, and we did not have another steady pianist until 1994 when we asked Kathy Talvity to join us. And since then, it's been 26 plus years of again, individual music growth and huge growth as a band together. We can't thank her more for being part of the band. So let's go to thing 4.
Number 4,
You're ready for it.
dance to the music.
Oh yeah, that was one of my absolute and is one of my absolute favorite rock and roll songs of all time. And not just for the words, it's just the tune and what they did with it and how they transported that idea forward. But what about that other one, by Sly and the Family Stone, where he says, all we need's a drummer for people who only need the beat. And let me do some guitar, make it easy to move your feet. So, yikes. Are we talking about English dance music? Why are we listening to rock and roll? But yeah, we only need a drum. We only need a pulse to dance. That's really all we need. But we have melody. Of course, things get easier to move. So when talking about dancing to the music, you think, well, what does that mean? How does that feel to you? What can I do on the bandstand to make it a great experience for you? When I was younger, watching ballet and modern dancers, I could see them move to energy and the emotion of what the music was saying, and sometimes step and move to the beat and phrasing, but not always. So there was a real variety there. During college, I saw the Joffrey Ballet perform, and I thought, oh my, there's the energy, there's the emotion, but wow, how they move with the phrasing, how they step with the pulses, and beats of the music. I felt very, very connected to that and much more resonance to that. And a number of years later, I saw the Mark Morris Modern Dance Group, and there was a dancer, a male dancer, who did something I'd never seen or better than I had ever seen, even with Fontaine and Nureyev. This man could carve space. He just had a conversation between his arms and legs and trunk and head. His entire body was having a conversation with the air around him. And I always remembered that. It was just so extraordinary. All of these added to the visual library for me of what it looked like to dance to the music. So even if they're not dancers, I feel that it's really great if musicians playing for country dancers understand the choreography of the dance, possibly even just the energy and the movement feel, but even better yet, when there's strong points, the things to emphasize, how to make musical choices that help the dance communicate, how to make the music communicate better to the dancers, and how to dance to a pulse. So as a musician and a dancer, I really feel that it's delicious to just feel the music helping me with the choreography, and I'm helping the dancers with the choreography. Earlier, I think I said, I may have left that out, but tunes began to speak to me spatially when I was playing contra dance tunes. And by that I mean a tune might feel vertical or it might feel horizontal. And I'm talking about is the space between the main beats or the pulses. Those are the beats where the dancer puts their step down on the floor. So I also listen and feel how the melody's rhythm is moving over that steady pulse. And when I also want to feel the spaces between the notes themselves, no matter what rhythm they may be. And you can do all sorts of things there with changes of volume, or you could add more notes between notes, or you could have less notes and create space. So all this awareness gives variety and how you can play with energy and texture. When I teach music to my students, of course, I'm teaching the Suzuki style, which means they're learning by ear, and they're not reading music. They'll read later. And they're learning, Suzuki called it mother tongue method, really. They're learning the same way that you've learned your language. You have a model. You get to repeat it a lot because there's lots of encouragement. How many times can you say da? Da da. So it's the same concept. They have models. They repeat by practice, but parents are there alongside to help them along the way. But because it's aimed at young children, even though you can do it for anyone of any age with success, you wake up their ear to muscle coordination. And the reading comes later. Because again, when you spoke, you did not read before you spoke. You just listened and imitated what was around you. So with my students, I have them bounce, and I'll take their hands and I'll hold them. I'll say, let's pretend we're holding the reins of a horse. You know, doesn't matter who's the horse and who's the rider, but let's feel this together. And deep in my gut, I'm sending them pulses. And I want them to feel that. And everyone felt that when they were in utero. You felt your mother's heartbeat. So it's the same thing. I want to get to them on that gut level. I want to get them into that feeling of here's the pulse of the music. But what's important is that I want them to sense the cyclical nature of the down and the up is the offbeat, which as a dance musician, it's halfway through the cycle of the beat till you get to the next one. As a dance musician, you got to know where that is, because that offbeat, of course, is so important for playing up-tempo music, but it is also when the dancers lift their foot. If you've got that in good pacing all around, then they know when to put their foot down. So, and I just got to tell you, my student yesterday, she's working on a Mozart concerto, but nonetheless, I told her, practice is part of sixteenths with your metronome on the offbeat. She looked at me like I was certainly from another planet, but she finally got it. She worked at it and she got it. And this is saying a lot for a kid who could not do this years ago. She could not play in time, so I'm amazed, but she's a high school senior now. But I asked her, what was it different for you? Well, how did this feel different than when the beat is there and you're going down to the beat rather than this way? She said, I'm more aware of the feeling from the top to the bottom. She said, before I was just aware of the feeling from the bottom to the top. So this is carving space also. This is sensing texture in your movement that you could bring into playing, even as, of course, a classical or any other kind of musician. But everyone feels space differently. Everyone feels beat differently. I find this concept can be very helpful, though. So that's speaking spatially about beats. And then there's other things like a harmonic rhythm. When the chords change, they could change different times. And how often they change is a harmonic rhythm. That affects the way a tune sounds greatly. When I was, it was what I was going to tell you earlier, when I was a kid and I'm playing in my initial primer, the Applebaum String Builder, probably half of you played violin and had that too. There was a song called Crunchy Cookies. And sure, a crunchy cookie was one of my delights as a child, but that's not why I like this song. I'm playing through this song and then there was this note. And I said to myself, ooh, there's something different happening there. And yes, it was a duet, so I played the other part and then I sang them together. And it was very clear to me that that was a chord that had not shown up in any of the other tunes yet in that book. That was probably only on page 5, but it was cool. So for the musicians, we know beginning early pieces are 1 chords and 2 chords, a 1 chord and a 5 chord. Well, this was a 4 chord. And I knew it. I didn't know what chords were. I didn't know what anything was. But this 4 chord took me out of my skin. I was thrilled. I was like, whew, this is really making music. So chords are like the sunshine through stained glass. They illuminate the melody. And they are very critical to the rhythm. So let's see, make sure I got this. So I realized I can communicate these concepts to dancers, and especially if I'm more aware myself of them, I can communicate. So here's some examples of these ideas. First, from a joyful noise, we'll play some music and take a look at a photo in a moment. We're going to play a piece that has more vertical feel to me. It's not like the very first one you might have heard on the intro music, but it's similar. And I just wanted to note that A Joyful Noise started in 1992, and it was me and Kathy Talbotty and Carol Compton. Carol is a wonderful recorder player and also an accordionist. And we played one gig, and she moved. So much for that. And we already had the name. We just thought, oh, this is great, because this is how we feel about playing music. So Kathy and I just looked at each other and said, what should we do? So we decided to ask Daniel, and luckily he said yes. So that became a trio. And that's 2 years before we had Kathy come in to hold the mustard. We've had many opportunities as a trio to travel and play. We went to Belgium. We played all over the country. It's been really great. So the photo that we have is from the Mayfair Ball, from the San Diego Mayfair Ball of 2015. And that was very special because Daniel's mother lived out there. And she danced with this San Diego group after we had been at Mendocino and met all the English dancers from that area, because she had come to hear us play. So she loved English dancing. She'd been doing some contra, but she loved it. And so this was really special because we could be there and play for her and her friends at the ball. So here comes the vertical sounding jig, Excuse Me, from our Red Star Line album. And just listen and see if you feel that. So for the horizontal feel, I hope you felt the verticalness of that jig, even though it's not a Humpty Dumpty jig quite as much, but it had, at least to me, more vertical feel between the pulses and the beats. So for the horizontal feel, I'm going to bring Reunion to the bandstand, and history for that is finding a fabulous meeting with Jonathan at Pinewoods English Week in 1994. And we had a grand time together, Daniel, Jonathan, and I. Later that year, someone called me and said, we'd like to hire you and Jonathan and Daniel to play for the New Year's dance at the Old Mill outside Washington, somewhere outside Washington, between Washington and Baltimore. It's their New Year's dance. And I said, I think we can do it. Yeah, I called her back, and she says, well, we need a band name. I'm like, I don't have a band name. But she really pressed. And so then I said, sitting in my kitchen, I said, okay, Reunion. So it stuck. It seemed to work, and we kept it. So we played that dance and many more. Jonathan's symphony schedule we were always working around, but we could usually get 2 dances in a year. Sometimes we're lucky now if we get 1, although with COVID, of course, it's been a real pause. And we played some couple dance afternoons together, too, which are really delightful. We were on the first 2 CDs that Gary Rudman produced of his dances, partnering with the band MGM, Margaret M. Martin, Mary Lee, and Jean Morrow. And then Orly Krasner many years ago actually also asked us to do a CD of her dances for her CD celebrations. So from that, we'll hear a horizontal example from the tune Crystal Spring. It's neat because you'll hear how Jonathan plays on the offbeats. certainly to help the dancers know how to step. And also for chords, as the music comes up into loudness, you'll hear the end of his solo where he plays some different chords than we chose to play through most of the ending of the piece. So enjoy. Hope you enjoyed that. And it's not just the tempo, it's also the feel. Tempos can be very different, and lots of conversations on bandstands about tempos between the callers and the musicians. We could talk about that some in the after talk. But also want to say, when you relate as a musician to a piece of music, you're looking at it melodically also. And there's information, let's say, about 3/2 time. Is it an older 3/2? Is it got sort of the hornpipey feel to it? What kind of tempo is going to work for this? Or if it's a 3/4, is it a waltz? What's the stepping? Is it got echoes of minuet phrasing in it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's many things to pay attention to in looking at timing. I wanted to mention some of the influences of people who connecting me to music and dance. Early on, Marshall Barron came down from New York and did a workshop with us, and I realized she had such great energy in her playing. And she also really respected the music, but had great mischief about it, playing. So she was really fun, and I said, have fun with it, respect the music, play with energy, understand the style, what would feel right for it. And my good friend Louise, my Suzuki and fiddling colleague, always play from your heart. And I think those things were already beginning for me on the bandstand at that point. I'd also like to note Erna Lynn Bogue, who was such an encouragement. I lived in Ann Arbor in the academic year from 1988 to 89. And they had a Tuesday night weekly English dance, and I had made friends with Erna Lynn by then, and she said to me, why don't you come and play? And I did, but it's just a duo, me and the fine musician David West. I had not done just duo. I have always been in more of a group, trio and quartet. So I realized how I needed to play differently and really make my playing even more interesting for the dancers to hear round after round, and also keep David somewhat in reins when he would go wildly off, on a solo or something. And so I thank Erna Lynn so much for that, because I grew hugely doing that. And I'd also like to say, during the 90s when Mustard had first met Fried Herman, I got to understand what it was like to play for her and how she liked to match music to her dances. I really got that when I played for her at the Free-for-Alls, which are the Berkshire Spring Explosions, which were so wonderful. She would present her new dances for leaders and dancers, and for us on the bandstand, it was all new also. We never saw them before. So this was duo playing at first with me and just Larry Wallach, wonderful pianist from the Berkshire area. And in the mornings were the workshops, and in the evenings were the dance parties. But during those workshops, we're sight reading music, changing chords from the rudimentary ones on the page. And we've got one eye and ear on the teach, but even if we did a walkthrough or a pre-teach playthrough, there was still surprises as she taught it. She would have us change the tempo. She wanted to make sure we got how to match it to the phrasing of her dancing and the dance. And it was just a fabulous seat to be in as a student up on the stage playing. And best of all, some of my most memorable moments were at those free-for-alls, because there was one particular one I would never forget, where the music and the dancers and the whole hall just got magical. And the dancers truly created art on the dance floor. It was absolutely breathtaking. This was, not sure what year, I have to check back with Paul Ross, who loaned this photo, with a Joyful Noise playing for free. And I'd like to note that she was such a wonderful person. She was down to earth, well read, and easy to have conversations with. She held strongly to her principles, and could be tough to take at times. But she had a huge heart. And when she got older, she was in more pain, so it was harder for her to be patient. But I'm so grateful for all that I learned from her, and not only to know and work with her for so many years, but especially for once early on when I met her, probably in 1981 or 2, when I watched her joyously float across a dance floor. Now let's go to thing 5.
Yes. Thing number 5, and we are running a little bit late, but we're going to do it because we got so caught up in what you were talking about. So thing number 5, the gift of community.
I know that can sound kind of cliche, but it's something I experienced early in my life, and I so value it. So I'd like to start by noting my family, again, moving out of New York into Paramus, a lot of immigrant families, of course, in first and second generation. And we all shared alike. And for nearly 50 years, 5 particular families shared Christmas Eve together. And it was just the most wonderful thing. And I wanted to show this wonderful group of people. And let's see, there they are. This is at our wedding, and you can see me, I hope, with a big smile. And the woman to my left, tall, that's Mrs. Lopresti, who heard me through the windows singing and playing my violin at the same time. And this is already another generation sitting down on the right side of the photo too. So this was just so fabulous to have these wonderful people in my life all the time. The woman to my right, Mrs. Pujol, just turned 100. So some of these folks are not here, but this is a wonderful moment where we remember being together. Thanks for the photo. And becoming a Suzuki-style teacher meant that I joined another community, teachers who really cared about children and their families, nurturing them, and doing something for their greater good. Here's a photo of me leading some of the kids at a concert. And all different ages. I guess everybody's up, not anybody sitting down on that one. I'm not sure. Probably the little ones are in the audience. But my friend Louise and I made some dances. We created some dances where the kids could play. Our friend Janet Mills called. And let's bring up the picture of the kids playing. Well, just about. We're actually watching the teach. You can see they're looking out at their families and friends as Janet's teaching them. And, yep, their toes never touched the floor. In the dance community, the Princeton dance has always felt to me like a brigadoon. It absolutely felt, that's fine, you can put the photo up, a May Day, go for it, that's fine. This is May Day on the Princeton battlefield, very historic place for the Revolutionary War. But our display teams and other friends would come for May Day, and Janet Mills is kind of right under the center of the maypole, and she's the leader of the maypole. This is a long time ago, 1994, a beautiful, magical morning. But this whole community, it just really felt like a brigadoon, like a community that knew each other before and had magically reappeared. The friendships, the caring, the fun was and continues to be so thick. And the work, too, was there for sure, but there was this momentum to make everything really wonderful together, week after week, potluck by potluck, special event by special event. And yes, I will note that the Mercer oak is not there, but an acorn from it has grown into a lovely tree. That tree was there at the Revolution. So, Hold the Mustard would play in this rotation, as I said before, and we would play also at Yardley for a bit and then Lambertville, west of Princeton. And these dances, the Lambertville and Princeton dances, especially the contras, were just amazing. We used to call it Primal Princeton. It was just amazing. But we had this rehearsed pickup band one year, early on, I think 1991, and we began what was called Rum and Onions. We invited a special caller, which was Tony Parks, and he came down and we had an afternoon and evening with this rehearsed band. And we did pretty well. So we thought, well, let's do it again. So we have done this for umpteen years, about 40, and I've been in every band, and I've led a few. Here's a photo from 1983. Maybe you'll guess the caller. Oh, no, there's this first. I'm so sorry, I forgot. This was before that. That's fine, thank you. This was, I think, 81 or 83, somewhere around there. And the other fiddler I'm having a great time with is John Prenio. He was in the other band, Tripping Upstairs, that played for Princeton. And this was after a music workshop that had happened. So he moved to Maine, and he's a wonderful fiddler. So yes, we just had great times playing no matter what we were doing, jamming, workshopping, etc. So let's pull up the photo of Rum and Onions. Here I'm leading the afternoon dance, and this is at a gym in a local school. Off of the caller's left elbow, you'll see CDSS camp director Steve Howe, who came down from New York. Rum and Onions used to attract people from all over. New York, North, West, Washington, D.C., etc. This is the evening dance, the next photo, and I think this is the first time that we dressed up for Halloween. So that was the first time of doing that. Our caller was Todd Whittemore, if you didn't recognize him from the back. And the next two photos show you how serious we are about our costumes. Another year that I was leading, I sewed this and got everything, I think, stitched probably moments before I had to drive over to start the sound check for the band. Now, Carmen made a few appearances. And then another one is Daniel and I being Calvin and Hobbes. And yeah, it was easy for me to put electrical tape on a red shirt, but I got the pattern for Daniel and he sewed that costume, which is amazing. But with all our contras and all our fun, when we're doing English, I will want to also say that the Lambertville and somewhat sponsored also by Princeton Dance does an English dance called the February Fling, which was to be a ball without all the trappings, a high-end ball. And we have been the house band for that for many, many years, and so thankful for that. One of the other ways that community is important is where we find ourselves and when we find ourselves at dance camps. And it's also an opportunity to give back. So here's some camp photos which I think you would enjoy. I'm not sure when this one's from, but this is Pine Woods, very early on, I'm sure, because I could tell by my fiddle and also not having a pickup. The photo might be by Stephen Spinder. I didn't get a chance to check with him, but I know he did a lot of black and whites back then. So it might have been early 2000s. And as I said, camp is also a place to give back. So I've done a lot of band camp, band workshops at camp, I'm sorry. The first one here is Buffalo Gap, and that's 2002. And the next one was at Pine Woods in 2000. And just so wonderful to meet so many people and have fun together in a band class. And of course, at dance camp, there's always time for fun. And this was at 1988, having a last night party, fling fun. No, I did not light the cigarette. But notice I'm channeling my father playing the drums there, which was his instrument. It's exciting to be on something, in on something at the beginning. And after a June dance week at the John C. Campbell Folk School in Brasstown, Bob Pasquarello spoke with Bob Dulcimer, the coordinator for music and dance, about creating a dance week for contradance musicians. Well, Bob Dulcimer took that by the reins and created it, and we would do a few together and then pass it on to others, and it's run for many years. That was on the first day of the camps that I taught there. The staff said, yep, teach Pulse, do Pulse. And that was the very first thing at every first time that I taught there that we would do. The next few photos are some English. This is the CDNY ball, New York ball, in 1989. I think it's the first Playford ball I played. And I think it's at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. Margaret and Martin's on piano, and that's Ellen Delahanty on the recorder. We spoke about her last week a bit because she moved to the Low Countries and studied in Holland and Belgium to do recorder. And it was such a delight to play with her, as we did sometimes at Hudson Guild Farm too. And then this photo is Playford Ball in 2001, and that wonderful person that I am so ecstatic to be thanking is Charles Bolton. He was invited to come over and play and call along with Beverly Francis. So that was such a delight and treat. I'm so grateful for everything I've learned from people like him, choreographers, and others that I've worked with, like Fried and Philippe. Thanks. I just wanted to mention, too, going over to Belgium and meeting the dance community there. You met Simone last week if you were on, but meeting so many dancers and dancers from so many countries when we played a weekend there. And then also going to the UK with Jonathan, with Reunion, and playing there. So it's been fabulous to meet dancers all around. I know that the 5 Things to Web Chats have had on musicians who are also composers. That's not something that I've done. I've sketched out some tunes, but I love matching tunes to dances or making medleys. And I'm very happy that a number of dances that I've matched to English have come into the repertoire, where a caller said, or a dance choreographer said, I need a tune. And I was able to come up with something for them. And I'm so thankful for all the music composers, everyone from Anonymous, who wrote Selinger's Round, and Purcell, and all the classical, and all our modern composers, like Jonathan, like Kathy, Dave Bardley from last week, Dave Weisler, who Daniel and I have played with a number of times, having a great time, playing English and couple dance. And I want to thank one other special person who I have partnered with and who helps me in every way, and I've played all these last waltzes with since 1980. And that's my Daniel. And we have a nice picture here of dancing together at the Playford Ball, or mostly Playford Ball, in Philadelphia in 2017. And it's a lovely photo from Rachel Winslow, excuse me. So the sum of my 5 things is that what's in my dancing mind is to dance with you inside myself while I'm on the bandstand, and with the hope that my music supports you and inspires you as you're dancing. Well, thanks very much. I look forward to talking to you some more in the after talk.
Oh, that was wonderful. I get so caught up, I lost track of time. So I'm glad we went on a little bit long. We have to ask you, because everybody asks, what's your favorite dance? And because you're a musician, we also want to know, what's your favorite tune? Is there a tune that gives you great joy to play or listen to?
Sure. Well, first I'll do tune, and it's kind of whatever tune is of the moment that's being played, unless it's sometimes a uninspiring tune. That can happen, and that's the reality. They're not all great tunes. So, but there's a joke on the bandstand with Kathy, whether it's Mustard or Joyful Noise, and as I'm again sitting right next to her in my side saddle spot, if we play her waltz, her last waltz, Breakaway Heart, she'll gently say out of the corner of her mouth, "No crying."
Oh, yeah.
And as far as the dance, that's hard to choose, but I would just love to say the memory that has stuck with me of Freet's dance, Peace Be With You, that I had danced it a number of times when it first came out and a few years after. And then think I danced it for 10 years easily. And I was on the dance floor and it was called. And my body just knew what to do.
Wow.
It was like the perfect, yes, this comes next. It was just so deeply in me, and it may be a perfect dance in that simplicity.
Wow.
So
That's lovely. What a great memory. Well, we do have some announcements to post for Barbara. We're upcoming events where we'll be able to hear her playing live. So that's wonderful. And let's see, make sure you take a look for the link to the Dropbox, because that's where you're going to find the chat. If you wanted to grab it and hadn't yet, you can grab it there. Oh, I need to ask you, excuse me, are you a tea drinker?
well, not much anymore, unfortunately, but I can answer your question a different way. So instead of a favorite tea, I have a favorite key. And my favorite key is D minor with a real close second of D major. And that's because they resonate beautifully on the violin, but they're also great tunes to improvise them. So that's my favorite key.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for coming back. I know it's a lot of work, and you worked so hard on last week's, and here you are right back again. So thank you for all that.
More than welcome. More than welcome. I was honored to be part of that last week and very much appreciate being asked again.
And thank you to our Five Things team, Lindsay Verbal, and in the background, Adele Nichols on Zoom, Larry Hanson on Facebook, along with our helpers, Kara King, Dan Vilter, and Reed Wilson. He's still around. He's just taking a week off. Watch our Past Five Things web chats. You can find the link on our website or on our YouTube channel or on our Facebook page. You can get the link to the after talk if it's too late for you. We're happy to send it, but you need to email us and ask for it. A big thank you to all the folks who've been sending in donations to our group, the Historical Tea and Dance Society. It is appreciated. We do put that money to good use. We make this show. And of course, we have our little Five Things pin that we still have, Five Things pins. You can check the chat for how you can get one of those. And we love seeing them on people. So thanks. We are posting the After Talk link. And coming up next week, we have Frederick Park. And Frederick Park has been teaching and collecting dances for more than 50 years. He's a dance caller, English, country, contra, squares, and folk, a teacher, a choreographer, an organizer, a master storyteller. If you love stories, you definitely want to come next week. We'll post the link for how you can sign up for that. On Thursdays, we have tea time at 5 o'clock Pacific. So drop in and say hi and just hang out for a while. We talk about all sorts of things. And for donations, Barbara recommends Homefront, an organization in Barbers County, and also the Suzuki Association of the Americas. We are going to post the link for that. Barbara, do you want to say something about our exit music?
Yeah, sure. I will say that it is Hold the Mustard playing for Philippe's Dance the Pharmacist's Pleasure. It's called a piece called Cromlet's Lilt, It's by a Scottish Baroque composer, and Paul found this music and sent it to Philippe saying, maybe you'd like to use it, which he did so well. And I'd also just like to say, if you want to tune into CDNY Live on June 10th, Hold the Mustard, all vaccinated, will be together to play live for CDNY. Go to their website. So,
And
yeah.
we have posted the link for that. So
Oh,
I
cool.
think they can put, yes, yes. So absolutely, we are going to be there. Woohoo. See you all in 2 minutes in the after talk. Might be a little bit short, but this was worth it. Thank you all.